So let's get started. Yesterday we were talking about what the source was to teach us that tefillin is a mitzvah. Yesterday we were talking about what the source was, but it remains a machlokes in the poskim whether tefillin can be worn at night or not. And in the final analysis, the Bavli is of the opinion that tefillin could be worn at night biblically, but the rabbis forbid it because it may be difficult while you're sleeping to maintain a clean body. There may be flatulence, and that would be a disgrace to the tefillin. Okay, now the Gemara now is going to continue this discussion of tefillin and its status of a mitzvah that may or may not apply at night. But what would be another ramification if it's a time-bound mitzvah? It could be the reason for women to be excluded. Okay, so Taman Taninan, we're Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, and it's 5 lines from the bottom on Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. So Taman Taninan, Nashim va'avadim peturim mikriya shema u'minat tefillin. So women and servants who also have the same, we're talking about Canaanite servants who have the same scope of commandments as women. They're only obligated in mitzvah saseh when they're not time-bound. Okay, they are exempt from Kriya Shema and from tefillin. So Nashim Minayin, how do we know that women are exempt from putting on tefillin? Because the Torah says in the Kriya Shema, V'limadatem osam es b'nechem. You shall teach your sons about the Torah. So that teaches me that women, v'lo es b'nosechem, and not your daughters. That teaches me that women are exempt from the mitzvah of studying Torah. However, so what does that have to do with tefillin? Because v'limadatem osam es b'nechem l'daber b'alma b'shivtecha b'veisecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderecha v'shrocha v'kumecha. Because right before then is the pasuk ukshartam laos al yodecha v'hayu l'totafos bein einecha. So that's how I know that just like women are exempt from Torah study, women are also exempt from the mitzvah of tefillin. Aval nashim she'enan chayavos b'talmud Torah enan chayavin b'tefillin. So therefore, women who are exempt from Torah study, because the Torah says, B'nechem, your sons, to exclude your daughters, they are exempt from tefillin. So now notice that the Gemara doesn't say because the tefillin is a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. It could be that the Gemara is going according to the opinion that it's not a mitzvah saseh shazman grama because, as we saw, this is a machlokes. So hatevon. So the question that the Gemara asks is, Hare Michal bas Kushi, Haisa loveshes tefillin. But what about King Saul's daughter? Now it's interesting, we call her Michal bat Kushi. Does anyone know why Shlomo was called Kushi? Shaul was called Kushi. So the Gemara in the Bavli says that the reason why he was called Kushi is that just like a Kushite has a distinctive skin color, so too was Shaul HaMelech, very distinctive in his piety, in his goodness. Okay, so just like Michal wore tefillin, V'ishto shel Yonah, Haisa Ola l'Regolim, and Yonah, the prophet, Jonah, his wife, used to make an aliyah l'regel, even though women do not make a pilgrimage on the regalim. V'lo michu biyadam chacham, and the chachamim didn't protest. Now, if the Chachamim didn't protest, does that not imply that women are obligated in the mitzvah? Now, you might say, what kind of question is that? Just because a woman is exempt from a mitzvah, does that mean that it would be prohibited for her to do the mitzvah? So the answer is that these are 2 examples where elsewhere the Gemara says that it's problematic to do that if you're not obligated in the mitzvah. What are we talking about? So we know that tefillin requires a guf naki. Tefillin requires a clean body. If your body's not clean, you're not permitted to put on tefillin. Let's say a person has diarrhea and just is having a terrible bout. So he's not allowed to put on tefillin because he may explode at any time. Okay. So a woman, the Gemara says, it may not be able to keep her body clean. And as such, we should not permit a woman to put on tefillin. No, no. The Gemara was working under the assumption that women, I guess maybe in the ancient world, had a harder time keeping their bodies clean more than men. I don't know why that is. I'm not really sure why that is. But the Gemara suggests that anyone who's not obligated in tefillin maybe shouldn't put it on because it could create problems. Okay, so that's argument number one. What about making an aliyah l'regel? What about making a pilgrimage to the temple during the Shalosh Regalim? What's wrong with that? So the answer is that a man who makes a pilgrimage is supposed to bring an animal with him as a korban, because it's a korban chagiga, and there's an obligation. Shalosh pamim bashana yera'eh kol zuchurecha, that for 3 times out of the year, all of your males shall be seen, meaning that they shall be seen bringing a sacrifice to Hashem. So when you make a pilgrimage, you have to bring a korban with you. Now, what's wrong with a woman bringing a korban with her? Well, she's not obligated. Yeah, but you can bring a voluntary sacrifice. That's the problem. People won't realize it. People will see a woman bringing an animal with her, will think that she's doing it for the sake of the korban chagiga that she's obligated to bring. And they will think that she doesn't know the halacha, and they will think that a woman is bringing a wrong korban. She's bringing chulin, something that is not permitted to be brought into the Beis Hamikdash, and she's bringing it into the temple. So that's the concern. Okay. So
You want to get the door?
no, you should tell them, please be quiet. Gentlemen, we're learning in here. Okay. Okay. So velo michu biyadam chachamim. And the Chachamim didn't protest. So if the Chachamim didn't protest, and there is a reason to protest, because for these 2 mitzvahs, if you're not obligated, you could be creating problems, doesn't that imply that these 2 mitzvahs women have a mitzvah to do? A woman has a mitzvah to wear tefillin, because otherwise the Chachamim would have shut it down for Michal, and a woman has a mitzvah to make a pilgrimage, otherwise the Chachamim would have shut it down. Yeah.
These 2 were known to be at such a high level that people wouldn't jump to the conclusion that they're doing something wrong.
You could perhaps make that argument. Maybe that would be one of the Gemara's answers, but the Gemara provides a different answer, because maybe the Gemara wouldn't be satisfied with that. Like you see a nondescript woman making a pilgrimage to the temple. How do you know that that's Jonah's wife, Mrs. Jonah? And how do you know that, that just because we allow Michal to put on tefillin, maybe some feminist is going to come along and say, well, if it was good enough for Michal, it's good enough for me.
The Me Too, the woman of the wall.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Corbin. Woman of the Corbin.
And moved into minions. And then the women started making the minions with the tefillin, and then the talis, right? This is what's happened today.
Okay, so all right, not to get too political, right? But yes, it is recorded, as it turns out. Okay, I wasn't going there, but this was Moish Posner. He is the anti-feminist. Okay, so Rebbe Chizkiya b'shem Rebbe Avahu ishto shel Yona hushava. Umichal bas Kushi michu biyada chachamim. So the Gemara says, well, in fact, your recollection of the Brisa is flawed. When Mrs. Jonah tried to make a pilgrimage, she was rejected when she came to the Beis Hamikdash. They did tell her, no, it's not okay. We appreciate the sentiment, but you have to. We will not permit you to come inside. And when Michal bat Kushi started to put on tefillin, the Chachamim did protest. So now there's also, by the way, a record of Rashi's daughters wearing tefillin.
Yes.
If you've ever heard that before, I don't remember what the source is, but it's brought down somewhere, and I don't remember where. Someone will have to do a chat GPT on that to find out where Rashi's daughters did that. So Steve, there are poskim who say that an exceptional woman might be permitted to put on tefillin if she's able to be extremely meticulous about the cleanliness of her body. But it is not something for the general population to do. And therefore, there have been situations where very progressive, let's say, very progressive high schools have allowed the girls to put on tefillin. But that's generally not the accepted norm. That's not the accepted norm.
So the Rabbi may have addressed this before I came in, but is it not considered a time-bound mitzvah?
So that's the point, is that we discussed yesterday whether tefillin is a time-bound mitzvah or not. But the thing that you might want to argue is that even if it is a time-bound mitzvah, we've already established that women are exempt.
Right. Oh, but maybe.
So we've established that women are exempt from this mitzvah.
No, maybe.
So, but the Gemara's question is, how could you say that women are exempt when we have precedents for two women doing these mitzvahs, where there's a downside to doing the mitzvah if you're not obligated in the mitzvah? Okay.
So there's no source. It's really a legend.
It's a legend?
And it was reported 2 centuries afterwards, and there's no source, but it does mention Mincha. Wearing tefillin.
Okay. So as a matter of course, it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that a woman should not put on tefillin.
Exempt, not allowed to, or exempt?
Now the Rama says that women are not allowed to because Shema tafiach b'hem, because she may become flatulent, and without her even realizing it, something may slip out, and therefore we don't want her to take that risk.
Why would that be different from that?
Because a man is obligated. So when you're obligated to do a mitzvah, we tell you, be a man and control yourself, right? But
Suck
even
it up, so to speak.
right. But even though a man is obligated, if a person is suffering from a bout of flatulence or other kind of bodily explosions, then you're not allowed to put on tefillin either. The Gemara does talk about a story about, I think it was Rebbe Yehuda, who had suffered from his severe intestinal problems. And so for several days, he wasn't able to put on tefillin. And a person has to know that, if you can't maintain a clean body, you can't put on tefillin.
Does that hold true for Talaisim too?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because technically a tzitzis you can.
Intrinsically, it's not a holy thing.
Because, it's a full garment.
Right, but I mean, no, Marv is asking, well, the tzitzis, right, it has a different level of kedusha, right? So you walk into the bathroom with your talis cotton, right? Okay.
But it's usually covered up, just like you can take your suitcase in the bathroom.
Not always. I wear my tzitzis out. A lot of people wear their tzitzis out. The one thing you do have to remember when you wear your tzitzis out is if you go to a cemetery, you have to tuck them in, because there's a different halacha that you're not permitted to flaunt your mitzvah observance when you're in a cemetery. Okay, so now the Gemara is going back to a topic that we discussed briefly before. This was before we took a break, which was all about Rebbe Yochanan and his conduct when he would go to the bathhouse. Do you guys remember we talked about this, and that he only would take off his tefillin at the very, very last minute when he was in the inner chamber. And it was difficult to understand how he was permitted to do that, because it seemed that most people had already disrobed by then. So the Gemara is first going to clarify how the bathhouse is structured. Remember, we talked about that there were 3 chambers from the front door of the bathhouse until you got to the room where the actual bath was. So, Tane, nichnas lemerchatz, makam shebnei adam omdim levushim, yesham mikra utfila. So when you walk, so there are 3 chambers. The first chamber, it seems that almost everyone is clothed in the outer chamber. When you get to the middle chamber, that's when people begin to disrobe, and they give their clothing to the bath attendant. He puts it in storage. And it could be that you still have a towel around you or you're covered in some way. Once you get to the inner chamber, then everything comes off. Okay, so when people are in the outer chamber and people are generally clothed, so you're allowed to learn Torah, you're allowed to recite psukim, and you're allowed to pray. And it seems like you're allowed to put on tefillin as well, although it's not clear whether the girsa is tefillin or tefillah. Okay. Ve'ein tzarich lomar she'ela shalom. And you're certainly allowed to greet someone in the bathhouse at that point. No saying tefillin, you're allowed to put on tefillin. Ve'ein tzarich lomar shelo yachlotz. And you're allowed to have tefillin on, and you certainly don't have to remove the tefillin at that point. Makom sharov b'nei adam regilim lios omdim arumin. Once you get to the inner chamber, where most people are naked, ein sham she'ila shalom. You're not allowed to greet your fellow human being, because when you say the word shalom, shalom is one of the names of God. So you're not supposed to say shalom aleichem when you're naked, okay? Because you're saying God's name. Ve'ein tzarich lomar mikra utfila. And certainly you're not allowed to learn Torah, which could also mean to recite the Shema and to pray. V'choleitz tefillah, and you have to have your tefillin off. You have to remove, when you enter into that inner room, you already have to have your tefillin removed. Ve'ein tzarich lomar shelo yitein, and certainly you can't put on tefillin in that inner chamber. But now let's talk about the middle chamber. Miktsasan arumin u'miktsasan levushim. Let's say some people are undressed and some people are dressed. In other words, people are in different stages of undress. Yesham she'ela shalom. Then you're allowed to say shalom aleichem to someone. Ve'ein sham lo mikra v'lo tefila. But we are more machmir, because since some people are in the process of getting undressed, you're not supposed to learn Torah, recite the Shema, or pray. Ve'eno choletz tefilav, but ve'eno nosen. You're not obligated. If you already have your tefillin on, we don't obligate you to remove it, but we don't allow you to put it on in that place. Aval enon lov sham ad sheyetze me'osa rishus shel kol osa merchatz. And when you leave the Beis HaMerchatz, let's say you've gone to the bath, you've bathed yourself, and you leave, don't put on your tefillin. You put on all your clothes, but don't put on your tefillin until you've left the entire building, okay? Now, why is that? It seems that we want to give, I guess, added sanctity to the tefillin. We allow you to keep it on if you're already in the outer chamber or even in the the middle chamber, but out of respect to the tefillin, don't put it back on once you've taken it off until you're completely out of the bathhouse. Now, Vida Messiah Kaye Demar Rebbe Yitzchak, begin Rebbe Yochanan. So this supports the way that Rebbe Yitzchak understood the story of Rebbe Yochanan, because he had said, Ad Yaakov Tur Mesora, that Rebbe Yochanan would keep his tefillin on until he got to the middle chamber, where a man named Yaakov Tur Musra, he was the Yaakov, the bathhouse attendant, Hayalobsham. He would keep his tefillin on, okay? And so, in other words, basically, he would take them off only as he was entering into the inner chamber. Below, and not like, as the commentary says, below Kedivi Rabbi Chia bar Abba, she Rabbi Yochanan hayacholzen kishigia l'makam ha'uliyara and da'inu l'cheder ha'imsai. I guess the bath attendant was, so if you take a look at footnote 16, le'el chafalef amid aleph, nechlaku Rabbi Chia bar Abba v'Rabbi Yitzchak ketzin ha'yanoig Rabbi Yochanan b'tfilim b'merchatz. We had previously seen, a few weeks ago, we had seen a machlokus between these two rabbis, Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Chia, as to what Rabbi Yochanan did when he would come into the bathhouse. Im hisiram b'cheder ha'imtzoi shel beis hamerchatz, o b'cheder ha'panimi. Did he take them off? I'm sorry. There were two different people. There was a guy named Yaakov Tur Musra. Yaakov Tur Musra sat in the innermost chamber, and then there was a place called, there was the middle chamber where the Uliyaron, where the bathhouse attendant was, who would take your clothing. So I guess there were two people. One was the lifeguard who was in the bathhouse itself, and the other one was the guy who was in charge of the clothes. So the lifeguard was in the innermost chamber, and the guy who was in charge of taking the clothes was in the middle chamber. So where did Rabbi Yochanan take off his tefillin? So one opinion was he took them off in the innermost chamber. Like as he was entering the innermost chamber, he took off his tefillin because he wanted to minimize as much as possible the removal of his tefillin. But others say the other opinion was that he took them off in the middle chamber, which was where the clothing attendant was. Habraisa Homeres shein tzarich lachlotz es hatefillin ad shemagia lecheder hapnimi misayas leRebbi Yitzchak. So the brisa that we just saw that says you don't have to take off the tefillin until you're entering into the innermost chamber, that supports the opinion that says that that's when Rabbi Yochanan took off his tefillin. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to ask another question. And that question is, what are the parameters of defining what a bathhouse is when you have a structure that only is functional part of the time as a bathhouse, but not the whole time? So let's take a look at the Gemara's question. Rabbi Yirmiyah boi kome Rabbi Ze'era. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the following of Rabbi Ze'era: Ha'isa merchatz marchetzes biyamos hachama ve'ena marchetzes biyamos hageshamim. What if you have a bathhouse that is operational only during the summer months? And I guess maybe during the winter months, they shut it down. Now, why would they do that? I'm not sure. Maybe because they don't have sufficient heating elements to keep it hot during the winter. I'm not sure.
But you remember we saw a bathhouse when the big shot, Robert bathhouse, and it
Yeah.
wasn't 24, it's like it was all the time because they had a heating system.
Yeah, a lot of bathhouses had a very sophisticated heating system where it would run both in the winter and the summer. I'm just thinking maybe this was a cheap bathhouse and it only operated in the summer months and not in the winter months. So the question is, if you go there in the winter when it's not operational, because let's say the water's cold, let's say, you got the Vaughan swimming pool. My wife and I, when we take our Shabbos walks, we go to this park that's by Young, and they have a swimming pool. But the swimming pool has a season. It opens in May and it closes, I don't know, in September, whatever, And so maybe that's like the bathhouse over here. So obviously you can't be wearing tefillin when you're at a bathhouse where people are running around naked. But what if you go there during the winter where there no one's naked there? Are you allowed to wear tefillin and walk into that bathhouse? Or do we say that the structure intrinsically is tainted and you can't do anything that's holy in that structure? So Amar Le, so the response that Reb Zera gave back was, Merchatz afal pi she'ena marchetzes. He says, no, it has the same status of being a bathhouse, even though no one's bathing in it at that time. Ubeis hakise afal pi she'en botzoa. And the same thing is true about a toilet. A toilet or a privy has the status of a toilet, even though it may have been just cleaned, because once it's been designated as a place of relieving oneself, you can't. You have to treat it like a bathroom, and you can't think words of Torah in there anymore. So, therefore, that's the status. So if you take a look at footnote 17, he writes, Me'achar shahamakom mishamesh l'rachza. He says, since that place is used for bathing and people disrobe, the hahevel v'hazeya merubim bo, and therefore there's a lot of steam and moisture. Harehu b'makom ma'us afilu ka'asher ein mishtamshim bo. Then it's considered to be a place that's inappropriate, because when you walk in there, it's steamy, and it's not an appropriate place for a person to wear tefillin. Now, if he in the brackets, he says, Im nivna habinyan mitchila l'shem merchatz, if the structure was built for the purpose of being a bathhouse, afilu im rachzu bo pam echas bilvad, shem merchatz alav l'chol dinav. Then all it takes is just one person to bathe in it, and it has this halachic status of a bathhouse, no tefillin. Kaven sheyuad lamerchatz v'nasa bo ma'isa, since it was designated for that purpose and it was used for that purpose just once. Ulam haGemara kan medaberes kishelo nivna habinyan mitchilas l'shem merchatz. But the Gemara here is dealing with the question of what if the place was not initially designated as a bathhouse? Ulefichach im rachzu bo pam echas bilvad eno mo lahachshivu merchatz gamar. And therefore, maybe just the fact that someone already bathed in it just once does not automatically designate it as a merchatz. V'rakim regilim lirchatz bo bofen kavua b'yamos hachama yeshalav shemerchatz gamor. And therefore, only if people have a habit of bathing there regularly, even though it's only seasonal, that's what the Gemara's question was. And Rebbe Zeira says that as long as people use it regularly, even if it's only seasonal, it still has the status of a merchatz. Now,
So if you, in theory, if you have a brand new house,
yeah,
you move it, no one's been in it other than the builders, and no one's used the bathroom yet. It's the bathroom.
if no one's used it yet, yeah. So even though there's a porcelain, beautiful toilet, no one's used it yet. It doesn't have the din of a bathroom yet.
That's what it said, the bathhouse right here, you gotta use it once.
Yeah.
No, it seems like psychologically, it just seems like it'd be so it's strange.
I mean, no one's used it yet. You can have dinner in there if you want.
Go on a date.
Okay.
It's going out.
So, related to this, Mar Ukva Omar Ahon Chazira Beis Kisei Mitul Tolhu. He says, talking about bathhouses and toilets, he says a pig is like a moving toilet. In other words, when you're in the presence of a pig, you're restricted from thinking Torah and certainly davening and things like that, because a pig is such a filthy animal and is constantly dirty that he has the status of a movable cistern that is carrying dung, and you're not allowed to recite the Shema or pray, even though the pig may be super clean, even though the pig just took a bath, he's squeaky clean. But once he's been designated as a toilet, you're not allowed to recite anything. So another reason not to raise pigs, the Gemara is critical of Jews who raise pigs as an occupation, because a pig is a non-kosher animal, and there's a lot of history about the pig being a symbol of the Romans and Esav and things like that. But for a secondary reason, you shouldn't be around pigs so much, because you won't be allowed to do any kind of mitzvah that requires cleanliness. So now that we're talking about this, we're going to talk about in general, this is a big sugya having to do with being in the presence of human waste and being allowed to recite Kriya Shema. Rebbe Yona Bo'e, Ahon Tzurora Da'al Geif Yama Mahu. He says, what will be the halacha about certain stones that are found by the side of the river? And do they have a status of tsoa, and therefore you're not allowed to pray next to them, or not? Apparently, so these stones, I thought they were used for wiping, but apparently that's not how the Meforshim understand it. The commentary says Shehem Refesh Vatifnasriach Shapole Tayam, that apparently when the river is raging, it spits out certain smelly stones that are on the banks of the river. That's the way the commentary says it. So let's see the answer. Maybe we'll understand better the scenario. Amar Rebbe Ami Asya, Rebbe Ami, the doctor, said, Hore Rebbe Yirmiyah ruled, Ma'aver le bepilios, you just have to cover them with a cloth so that you don't see them. Below samchin iluye, but you shouldn't be too close to them. In other words, distance yourself 4 amos, make sure you don't see them, and then you can recite Kriya Shema and daven. In other words, just like with dung, you have to treat them like dung as well. We'll continue this discussion, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow. Okay?
You know, I checked on the history. Tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Oh no, tomorrow we're not learning. We'll continue Friday. Mirz Hashem. Everyone have a meaningful Tisha B'Av and easy fast.
I checked out with the tefillin, until the time of the Gaonim, they did one drop fast.